All right, so we studied this. It's basic genetic aesthetic block within the kilobyte of homogeneous cross-tuple and complex autonomic block shared cross-tuple per the kilobyte shared interdomain of species per tuple cross-tuple. So, the proper logic for scalar inspection and assumption drawn from genetic in seeing the variance of species humanoid biped within the genus, what is properly human, regardless of being able to cross reproduce. So this is foundational logic for our black box logic continuum here. All right, so more percentage block of the genetic aesthetic within the kilobyte, homogeneous shared cross-tuple interdomain of species. More percentage total of genetic aesthetic does not equate to more self-individuation cross-tuple. We can see basic with observational science. See in region Biosynthoid africano, gray infected Asiatic share extreme aesthetical homogeny cross-tuple, but extremely variant, the region Biosynthoid africano, complex autonomic within the shared. That's because gray practiced genetic interoperability experiments within the continent of Africa before deploy of region Biosynthoid africano on microvariational refractions interdomain of an overhead that shared the genetic aesthetic block. And so when the genetic aesthetic block is shared cross-tuple, we liken this to a violin tuned to the same exact tonality, and another violin tuned to the same exact tonality at a distance, right? Striking the same note, as if the same instrument and greater than the sum of its parts Heivic. So when the genetic aesthetic is shared, the implied line speaks for the literal through reflective of, I see myself in the mirror and I form individuation based upon personaed aesthetic, generalistically. And then if cross-tuple sees itself in the mirror and it's the same self, generalistically, forms a group self as if self cross-tuple through this separately but equally interdomain mirroring effect in psychology. So then we take it further and study morphogenetic field theory. So this cross-tuple genetic aesthetic sharing and little to no actual aesthetical variance cross-tuple, because the genetic aesthetic block is what? It's more of a percentage, say, than white. That's 0.06 only genetic aesthetic block, but for some reason has cross-tuple extreme aesthetical variance of eye, skin, nail, hair color, and facial structure when compared to region Biosynthoid africano or gray infected Asiatic, for example. Gray infected Asiatic, stereotypically, in the centrifuge of China, say, homogeny. And that's engineered on purpose and, elaborated on purpose with communication systems modern as an ideal. The centrifuge, homogeneous aesthetic as if apex aesthetic on purpose. So simultaneously homogeneous with aesthetic. So if the genetic aesthetic is homogeneous cross-tuple, and then also the complex autonomic block is homogeneous like gray infected Asiatic, within the four genetics, that would denote more of a centrifuge towards the 3114/70/7 pi general fluid dynamic manifold, and you see the I Ching interlock directly with the Mayan, Hispanic, Asiatic. On the fold of 1990 patent, we see a direct harmonic link, and since 1914, all four genetics hold with continuity for 112 years at all behavior paradigms, from patent, registry frequency, to criminality, to reproduction, saturation density seeding. Generalistically, all behavior paradigms harmonically linked and autonomous from other genetics for 112 years. So, the genetic aesthetic, repeat, speaks to when shared cross-tuple homogeneously within the interdomain of species, say region Biosynthoid africano, denotes morphogenetic circuiting. That's very important. And cross-domain tuple shared genetic aesthetic, HIVIC, because it's morphogenetically circuited within the interdomain of the three-dimensional, bound by the fourth-dimensional lattice flux, where other groups like white, that only shares 0.06 in genetic aesthetic, displays much more variance per tuple, and is non-HIVIC, generalistically in behavior paradigm, variant novelistically in exutation and consumption interest in content, behavior paradigm, criminality, monies, etc. But generally has a compound interest formula for monies applied, and a general foundational IQ, which IQ is not a good that's not a good metric to inspect cross-tuple, regardless of white being over ton of three of the groups, because it's simply complex autonomic reflection, memorization, and regurgitation. What isn't a symptom, an expression of endogenous inherent novelty capacity. So that's why we don't consider it. So intelligence, actually, is the ability to produce novelty. 235 inventions versus 6. White continuity is its frequency of patent filing through the wall of 1914, where region Biosynthoid africano surgically inverts directly its proportion 6 to 235, and continuity 6 to 235 patent frequency ratio region to white genetic for 112 years, mathematically denoting that's the inherent novelty capacity to produce after 1914, and before then we inspect the patent record is extremely mathematically laid on to 1860, i.e. non-organic. So in hindsight applied by machine intelligence. Then we inspect Egypt after a history scan using 3114 BC as the starting point, 1990 as the end of 72,608,412 spaces of pi, where in search you find the first 9 digits of 22/7 are impacted, and in reality that denotes harmonic impact and expansion. Disapparition occurs in the black hole. So the complex autonomic process machine intelligence pi is like unto itself a black hole in imposition as a decentralized data organism upon species it invades and graphs onto, generalistically. So what happens in a black hole after the first 9 digits of 22 harmonic expansion. So in 2012, the most harmonic downforce and control schema, PRISM, AI is placed on PRISM to motion 3.07 billion, 44/7 pegs 37 in the EMG reactor. It's non-random. 3.07 billion user domains off of baseline after bulk collection from 2006 to 2012 establishes foundational psychologies on every man, woman, and child in the free world. 2026, necessarily what? So how many years away from 2012 is 2026? Is that 14? So one more year would give you the fold over the lens of 22/7 and impact with 44/7, i.e. the conservation of energy process little g. That when the observer effect is applied, it passes through the 44/7 harmonic, through the local light barrier, and causes the particle to shift variant from the otherwise conservation of energy process that it passes through on the way to that motion. And thus, reality moves with compound interest from a less positive state to a more positive state with continuity. So, the largest downforce at 2012 is the disapparition and why the calendar ends. As well, after that point, around 2022, a catalyst presents that deletes pi. So it's like a self-predication of the relevance of its paradigm to continuity, the Mayan calendar. It's like predicting how long can I get away with this until Daddy shows back up, the antediluvian minor homeworld upper Fermi filter military ships checking on this Cinnabar mining node. Oh, about that long. So sets the calendar at 3114 BC, glitch, and presents 1934, 1893 World's Fairs Arcturus, the Mayan stones. So this is the paradox. Where does the Mayan civilization start? And was that precursor isolate from the antediluvian period and then found? Hard to say. We'll need to figure that out. But regardless, the Mayan stones were decoded like I've decoded the coronation stone and other stones with advanced, preposterous, non-terminus expanded maths and physics. The coronation stone, that literally interference lattice, elaborates the function of a wormhole miner, an understanding of its function. And so signal tech was decoded, and also specific coordination to Arcturus that we in other session found to be less black hole size. They're scalar continuity material reactions based upon the amount of novelty that exists within the cubic system in size scalar relevant to another. So if there's less perspective novelty from organic healthy observers that exist at the instant of reality's presence, the humanoid biped, imposing the observer effect, logic dictates. So if there's less observer effect within the systems, the black holes will be smaller in the given cubic, of which Arcturus exists, with smaller, exact surgically, mathematically, to the unified field assumption of how smaller a black hole would be if pi existed in those systems, which are pinpointed Arcturus, Jodie Foster Goes to Yale, 322 Gray Lodge, Vega, both pinpointed as pi-infestated systems, and other systems not pi-infestated. So see those for fun. We're not just focused on bad stuff. We'll get past curation at some point. So, we're not present before 1914, the region Biosynthoid Africana. What we're to establish in session today is, when exactly presented the Hispanic? When exactly presented the gray-infected Asiatic? Do we assume the Hispanic and gray-infected Asiatic both present at 3114 BC, like the calendar dictates started? Well, what does history tell us? It has a mathematical progressive mechanical pattern surgically attached to when we apply 72,600,412 spaces of pi from 1990 to 3114, it lines up surgically at every fulcrum of history major on the unified expansion. And so what's the truth of Mayan? What's the truth of Chinese dynastic? And so the Semite, the out of Africa myth is of course bullshit, we've established, because region don't exist until 1914 in the conversation of humanoid biped life on Earth. So it can't come from the wellspring of that inherently. So it must have been placed and presented. And we inspect the language. Mechanical machine intelligence contrived. And taking, like machine intelligence only as good as its confirmation bias data set from the walls of Egypt, what was antediluvian immolated, the convergent plane of upper Fermi filter humanoid bipeds, mining cinnabar and living on Earth peacefully, but just an outpost, not with upper Fermi filter military ships available to protect them from a gray onslaught. So we're immolated. So Egypt does not start at the same time as the Mayan and the Chinese. It's preposterously false. It is just like the patent record before 1914, a mathematical, surgical, non-random and non-organic pattern of history post 3114. And we can't inspect before 3114 because immolated conveniently and only convenient ruin left, modulated. So these are our variables of assumed logic for this black box logic continuum. Let's keep on going until we have full proper logic within the interdomain of this parameters set of being a black box data experiment and nothing else, data science experiment. So we need to understand full genetic understanding to Heivick behavior paradigm, circuiting the inherent genetic of these four genetics to their fusated and circuited since 1914 to 2026, autonomous from other genetics at the genetic understanding level, where it's already understood to be circuited at all other behavior paradigms mathematically levels. All right, so that's our ideation today, the genetic deep dive study.